Southern California too much. But here to celebrate this wonderful book. And one of the things we texted a little bit, we've never met, but we texted a little bit before, and I said, is there anything you particularly want to or don't want to talk about? And she said, I can talk about anything, but I really do want to talk about the translation because I gather, I love talking about translation. I'm very interested in that. And so can you talk a little bit about that experience of being translated from Hebrew into English when you actually speak English? Yeah.
Right. So thank you so much, Tessa, and thank you, Cathleen, for being here. It's so great to celebrate this book. And you're right, this is a book in translation. I don't have the Hebrew original here with me. I should have brought it, but I don't. Someone has it. Thanks so much, Noah. So this is the Hebrew book that came out 2 years ago. And the Hebrew title is Shanim Tovot. If I translated it literally into English, it would be good years, because in Hebrew, instead of saying have a Happy New Year, we say Shana Tova, have a good year. So the English title, Happy New Year's, echoes the English title. And I really feel that someone is missing here, which is Jessica Cohen, the translator of this book, because she did such an amazing job translating it. And also, I really feel that this book, the English book, is a co-authored work, and we really collaborated on it.
So you did. So you were involved in some of the choices, and
I was involved. Yes. So I've been living in English-speaking countries for 31 years. Obviously, it's not my native language. I make mistakes, like 2 or 3 per sentence, and
so do all Americans, including me. So,
but I have very strong feelings about my Hebrew. So since I can read English, I was really involved in the translation. And Jessica and I have been friends long before she translated my first book, The Hebrew Teacher, into English. That was last year. And we always dreamed of working together. And I'm very grateful to my publisher, Michael Wise of New Vessel Press, for taking up this book and making our dream come true. And I think this book is particularly challenging for translation. First of all, because let's talk about what is this thing, what is this creature. So Happy New Year's is an epistolary novel, but not an ordinary epistolary novel. It's a novel comprising of 50 letters sent annually over 50 years by a woman, an Israeli young woman who goes to America to teach Hebrew. And every year, just before Rosh Hashanah, she's writing a letter to her friends back home, her friends from the Teachers College, telling them what happened over the past year. So one challenge is to capture the voice of this particular heroine. And she has a very specific voice in Hebrew that I think Jessica captured very well in English. And the other thing is the book starts in 1966. It ends in 2016. So at least over the first 10 or 15 years of the letters, Leah, the heroine, is using very, very old-fashioned and obsolete slang that I barely remember from my childhood in Israel. And I heard from many people, oh, you reminded me of how we used to write letters back in those years. So the other challenge was how to capture this in English. And I think in both respects, the translation stands really well.
It's wonderful, as is the translation of the other book, of the Hebrew Teacher. So speaking of voice and her voice, Leah's voice, it's very interesting to me anyway, because she is both. You feel this warmth toward her, and she's a little bit naive, and also clearly kind of an ambitious person, but a little naive. She is also incredibly annoying sometimes, and that's clearly on purpose. And I love characters like that who have that kind of depth to them and complexity. I mean, it's like Jane Austen's Emma, except that Emma interferes in everybody's life and makes everybody else miserable by accident. And this poor woman interferes in her own life and makes it difficult.
Trying so hard to make it better, and
Right.
yeah.
So how did you decide, and when did you decide that was the kind of person that she was?
So, I really love playing with forms, with literary forms. My first book in Hebrew was a novel in verse. And, it went down from there. I really love playing with different forms. So in the case of this book, form came first. I remember the moment I was driving on Highway 17 to Santa Cruz on a very, very rainy day, barely, making those twists in the road. And all of a sudden I thought, how about a novel made of 50 letters sent over 50 years by a woman who... And I thought, okay, I want to do that. This was in 2009. The Hebrew book came out in 2023. So it took me 14 years to actually realize this project. I always had, a book that came in the way, a book that was, a lower hanging fruit. Because this one was a very difficult book to write, And the biggest challenge, I think, is with this kind of project. How can you write a book made of 50 letters about an ordinary woman? She's no intellectual. She doesn't have very, interesting philosophical thoughts, right? Ordinary woman who has an ordinary life. And every year she's just telling her friends what happened over the past year, and still keep the readers engaged and make them want to read it. So this was my problem, and I was stuck with it for the longest time. And now we're coming to why Leah, and obviously I thought that, in order for the book to work, I will need, not someone who has very little self-awareness, who is extremely naive, as I think one critic in Israel called her naive to the point of stupidity. Someone who, how shall I put it, will enable me to open wider gaps between the lines. Because I think the only reason to write a novel made of letters is this play between what is being written and what we have to understand between the lines. Mm-hmm. And I think Leah, with her lack of awareness, really was the perfect protagonist for this kind of book. Because, if she was highly intelligent and highly suspicious, then how would it work?
Yeah, well, it would have to be about other people, not about her.
Right. So maybe I should just give an example. There's a point in the book when Leah is telling her friends at length how annoying her mother-in-law is. And she says that her mother-in-law always praises her son, Leah's husband. And when she doesn't have something new good to say about him, she brings up stories from when he was a kid. For example, when he was 9, he was evaluated by a psychiatrist who actually said that he has an IQ of a genius. Now, somebody more suspicious would say, why would a 9-year-old, and we're talking about the 40s or the 50s, would be evaluated by a psychiatrist? Maybe he had serious issues back then. But no, Leah is just, annoyed by her mother-in-law. So.
Yeah. And there are many instances of that where she misses what someone's really saying.
Right.
But we don't.
And also, one more characteristic of Leah, she's extremely optimistic. So this optimism, makes her, ignore red flags that somebody else might see.
Yeah, the optimism is something else I found very interesting, because she's relentlessly optimistic and endlessly disappointed. And it sort of goes like that. It's very biblical. And I read, and there's something very sweet about her because of the optimism, and again, something very like, you want to shake her and say, "Come on." And I read in one interview with you, the interviewer said, "So you're very optimistic," and you said, "Oh no, you've got the wrong, the wrong end of that stick." So how, and also I think in the Hebrew teacher, there's also a kind of very tender optimism that runs through it, in the same way. And so how do you, as a not optimistic person, how did that happen? Is this aspirational, or?
Probably part of it is aspirational. Yeah, I mean, I'm really a pessimist, or I think there's an afterword at the end of the book. We can talk about that later, but written by Leah's son, Jonathan. And he writes how optimistic she always was, and and it always clashed with my pessimism, or I'd rather call it realism. So I guess I'm like Jonathan. I'm realistic. I don't call myself a pessimist, but yeah. But isn't part of the greatest joys of writing is writing about someone who is completely different from you, and you don't have to live with your own neuroses and
trying to understand them, and okay, so all right, now you were no, not you. See, I'm doing that thing. So she was born in Romania, therefore in Israel she was an outsider. Okay. Which I found that very interesting too, because it's a part of Israeli society that Americans who are my age don't really think of. It's like they're all Israelis and they were all Sabras, and if they came from, like I know people who left, who escaped Europe during the war, and they went to Israel, and they were Sabras, so you just have this kind of cliched notion. So that was very interesting. She was an outsider in Israel. And then she comes here, and she's an outsider on the East Coast. And then she moves here, and she's an outsider on the West Coast. And was that something you, is that a situation that you're particularly interested in? I mean, coming from Israel, and is that something that you find important in her character?
I never thought about it, but now that you're mentioning it, I think yes, absolutely. And you're right. Leah was born in the early 1940s, so she came to Israel around age 8. And the 1950s were the years of mass immigration to Israel. And actually, you were particularly proud if you were a Sabra, because I think most kids were not. Most people who were born in those years. So yes, and I think at the beginning of the book she says, like, why did they always feel different? I mean, other students in our seminar, in our teachers' college, were also immigrants, but somehow I felt I think it comes from within. She's always like an outsider. Same goes for when she moved to California, and even within the Israeli community of Silicon Valley, she feels like an outsider.
Yeah,
maybe because she's single, maybe because other things, but yeah, she's always feels like she does not belong, and she wants so much to belong.
Yeah, so. and the various things that happen kind of reinforce, well, now I'm an outsider in this way and in that way, and I mean that's part of the reason I think that that one's heart goes out to her,
right?
Because she just can't quite, and you're right, and she wants to be part of things so much, and her son is not living, where is his wife, and and that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, if I can go back to what you mentioned before, that Leah is very annoying, and you're right, she's annoying, and purposely so.
Yeah,
but she's not mean. She doesn't have a mean bone in her.
No.
And I have other characters in other books that are plain mean. So I really feel that people are sometimes a bit cruel to her because she means really well.
Yeah. Well, that was something else I saw in this interview, which was a very good interview. And now I'm forgetting where it was, and which was that you feel sometimes that you're too gentle and kind toward your characters because which I also have that issue, and that you have to go back and sort of put some edge in toward them and about them. How did that work with her? Were you
Right. So I think what I meant, if I remember correctly, the interview that you mentioned is that in order to get the most out of a situation or of a conflict, you have to push the cringe a little more. So not be gentle. So yeah, make it very awkward for them, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
I have this expression that I love to use for my writing. Sometimes in earlier drafts, I do what I call leave money on the table, meaning, not really getting everything I can out of this particular conflict or situation. I really need to push it more. So,
Right.
so same goes for Leah. Yeah.
So did you kind of? I mean, I know the answer to this is yes, but you kind of discovered her, and as you went along and pushed the envelope, you discovered more depth and more conflict.
I did, but also, not this book takes place over 50 years. Normally, I mean, I think one of the biggest lies in literature is that, at least that's what my literature teachers in school told me, characters change. In a good book, no, characters undergo change, but in real life, people very rarely change.
No.
So but I think this book is realistic because over 50 years, there is some real change in Leah. She starts off as a vain and somewhat shallow young woman who's just, looking for a wealthy husband, or at least, someone that will give her a comfortable life.
Mm-hmm.
And towards the end, she has much more humility. She knows more about life. She's kinder to other people. Like, she's helping younger moms in Silicon Valley, and as as the communal grandmother there.
Yeah.
So that's a real change, right?
Yeah, it's a change, but it's not one of those, this happens and now I'm a new person.
Right.
Kind of. It's something where she grew.
Right.
Which is not quite the same as changing. She grows. I think.
She evolves. Yeah. Over 50 years, very gradually.
Yeah. Which, yeah. So let me see what else I have here. And one of the reasons I think that she changes and has to change is because the world is changing around her. And I think you did a wonderful job showing that over 50 years, the changes that are happening in the United States and also in Israel.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that that helps her grow, because she responds to that eventually. But did you find it difficult? I mean, I'm working on a novel now that is a lot of it takes place in the first half of the 20th century, and part of the challenge is trying to understand that time without appropriating that time, if you know what I mean. Did you find it very difficult or exciting or interesting going through these decades with her and exposing or illuminating various changes in American society and Hebrew society? Was that part of the pleasure, or was it like just excruciatingly difficult?
It was definitely part of the pleasure, but my job was a lot easier than yours.
Right.
Because not only, I was around for a large part of this period, but also, I could talk to people who did their PhD in America. There's a large Israeli community in Silicon Valley. Some of the people there have been around for 40, 50, sometimes even almost 60 years. So, I could talk to these people. And I think more importantly, the beliefs and the values of these people, I kind of know them. I would find it very, very hard to, as you say, without appropriating the time, to go into the brain of someone in the early 20th century, right? A time where most people feared God and had other beliefs. And
we think they did, yes.
Yeah.
Some of them did. But it's yes. I mean, that's part of the.
Right. So I used a lot of, I have a pretty good memory. I think it serves me. So, I started recalling stories that were told by, friends and acquaintances of my parents, for example, how in the 1970s, when Israelis were not even allowed to take more than $200 when they went abroad, you would call people you didn't know, like friends of your neighbors who you knew that lived in California. And of course, you would call them out of the blue because there was no email. And you would ask, can I come stay with you for a few days? So, which some people do to Leah. And I remember very well, I still remember very well the huge material gap in the 1970s between the US and Israel. People say, oh, did you know in America they have a TV in every room? And even your cleaning lady comes to you with a car and things like that. So I used some of it in the book. And then later on, I've been living in America since the mid-1990s. So,
how often do you go back?
I try to go twice a year. It was a lot easier when we had a nonstop flight from San Francisco, but.
And do you does going back? While you've been writing these two books, you wrote them in Hebrew. So and you've written many more in Hebrew. How many books have you written?
A total of 12.
Me too.
Yay.
But not in Hebrew. And so do you notice a lot of change there? Because obviously it's changed very much. And obviously in the last couple of years, that has affected your writing. And in addition to that, are there Hebrew writers about whom I know nothing, who have changed your way of writing or influenced you in a big way? And then we'll talk about Barbara Pym, my favorite writer.
Oh,
so yes,
wonderful. Okay, I don't know if how deeply we should go into this, but things in Israel are very tough and very sad. And I spent my most formative years in Kibbutz Nahal Oz, which is less than a mile from Gaza. So, I know people who died, or one of them is still, a hostage in Gaza, and I'm heartbroken for everything that Israel is doing right now in Gaza. I'm really. I feel terrible for everybody in this region, especially for the people of Gaza right now. So obviously people have much less attention span to read.
Yeah.
But even before the past 2 years, I guess it's not very different from the US, right? People spend more time on their phones, watch TV. Sorry, TV series have become really good recently, so people spend more time doing that. So people read less and less. But I'm a writer. That's my job. That's what I do, and I write and try to do this.
Yes, you can't. You really can't think. I'm obsolete. You have to just plod on. We dinosaurs. So how was writing this book, which is an epistolary novel, and the last book that was translated were 3 novellas. How is that different in the composition, in the I would find it very difficult to write 3 novellas, because to me that would be like, oh my God, I have to write 3 novels, basically. I have to have 3 sets of characters, and they have to have 3 different things going on. And I would find that very, very, very challenging. So I don't know, which one did you find more difficult or more interesting, or is there any comparison, or it's just like new form, I want to do this?
So I have actually in total 3 collections of novellas. Okay. My most recent book that came out in January this year is a collection of 3 novellas. So I have this thing with novellas. I love them. For me, they really combine the best of both worlds. So yeah, they're longer than a short story. You really have, something to bite on. It's not like, just start reading it and it's over. But they have a certain intensity, both emotional and poetic, that I don't think you can get in a novel, or rarely. So I really love novellas. It's my favorite literary form. And also somehow the scale works differently. So, a novel takes a long time, to get a draft, even if it's just, the length of 3 novellas. Somehow it's more. Whereas with novellas, it happened that I wrote a first draft in 3 weeks. So somehow it works differently. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And
I really
but
like it.
how about with this as an epistolary novel?
Ooh. So
So you were out of your comfort zone.
yes. So I think I was hatching for a very long time. As I said, it took I think so I started working on it. I think really writing it about 2 years before it came out. And I think I wrote a first draft, and then I worked with my editor, Eli Hirsch, who is in Israel, and he's a very good editor, and he's known me for a very long time. So, and we worked on making it more compelling, more interesting, more cut a little bit of extras and leave facts that seem trivial, but just so they serve the purpose of Leah prattling on and on about her life while not noticing something else. So this was mainly the editorial work and the challenge. And
that's one of the, I can't write short stories because I need to just go on and on and on and have the characters wander around until they find whatever they're finding. And I'm so in awe of people who can find that perfect detail and and have it somehow blossom into something. So okay, so so going back to what you said about how you find it hard to be cruel to your characters, and you have to go back and add some awkwardness and unpleasantness. Let's talk about Barbara Pym, who I gather is a favorite of yours. And my wife and I passed the Barbara Pyms back and forth for bedtime readings. There,
which novel is your favorite?
My favorite is oddly the first one, Some Tame Gazelle, is my favorite. It just touches me. But there's something I think sort of miraculous about those novels because they're not cruel. There's no cruelty in them. There's despair, there's loneliness, but the characters want to be decent, or they, there just isn't that. And especially when she was writing, which was, I think, a lot of it was the angry young man period in England. And there's something I read in one of her letters. She said about one book where she was having trouble selling, but she had finished it, and she said, I think it will provide some comfort to someone. And I thought, yeah, is that okay? I mean, that's a good goal that you don't always have to be lifting the rock and looking at all the worms and bugs and saying this is the real world. The world is also the rock that someone stumbles on, but
But on the other hand, she does write about especially England after the war, about the very grim realities of single
absolutely.
women without money live in terrible conditions.
Yes, and what they eat is. She was very
opening a tin.
Yes. Also, has anyone else noticed that in the United States you used to talk about a can of tuna, and now you talk about a tin of tuna? I find that very odd. In the New York Times recipes, it's always open a tin of beans. I'm thinking, where are you from? We call them cans. So what draws you to her, do you think?
It's a very good question. I came to know her about 12 years ago. I came across this book, Excellent Women, and it was the first and probably one of my most favorites.
Yeah.
And I think I really I liked her observational powers and her. You say she's not cruel, and you're right, but also she's very observant in a way that could be sometimes crueler.
Well, she can. It's cutting.
Sometimes.
Right.
I really felt an affinity, both as a reader and as a writer to her. So
I was very excited.
And it's also, for those of you who are not familiar, it's a very sad story, right? Because she had some success. She was not a super, best-selling author, but and then all of a sudden, around age 50, it was gone. No one wanted to publish her
Because
books.
it was the 60s, 70s,
She
70s.
did not fit in with the,
Right, it was the wrong.
London 60s, yeah.
And but then with I guess it was the four seasons. What's it called? The four
Quartet in Autumn.
Quartet in Autumn.
Yeah.
Suddenly people rediscovered her, and she became like a cult figure.
And then she died like a year later. Sorry, I'm the cruel
But
one.
she did live. She did live to see that.
Yeah.
So there's that. But yeah, that is one of the things. Let's see. I think, I don't know, is there anything else you really, I mean, we could talk about the elephant in the room for every Jew these days, which is what's going on in the world of Israel, Gaza, and American Judaism. But maybe in honor of Barbara Pym, we can sort of, yeah.
Yeah, what would Barbara do?
What would Barbara do? You know,
WW.
what would Barbara do? She would, I don't know.
Well, I mean, if we talk about the elephant in the room, there is a recent biography of hers where she was in love with a Nazi officer,
that's
and
right.
she sympathized with the Nazis, so we know what she would do.
Right. But as soon as, unlike the Mitfords, as soon as she loved the uniforms, and it was also, it was also glamorous to her. But she did immediately,
Right.
as soon as they were at war. But most people during that war were not exactly interested in saving the Jews. They were interested, especially in England, of saving England. So can't. But yes, you're right.
And on this happy note, yeah.
Yes. Well, I skipped over that part. And I would be like, I don't want to know. But yeah. Yeah.
Anyone have any questions? I'm so curious, since this book took you a long time from like the idea to like, actually writing it, what originally started within you like that made you want to write this specific book?
That's like a really good question, and often the answer is that I have an idea that gets stuck in my head, and there's no way to get it out except to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for my first book, which was a novel in verse, as I mentioned. It happened when I came across The Golden Gate by Vikram Seth, a novel in verse in English that's written by the Russian meter that Pushkin developed for Eugene Onegin. And I was so amazed how he could, take this meter and write something in English. And I have to see if this could work for Hebrew too, which is crazy, right? I mean, people ask me sometimes for advice how to write, and I tell them, I don't know. People tell me, I want to write a book, but I don't know how to write a book. I also don't know how to write a book. I know how to write those, 12 books that I wrote, and I'm struggling with the next one, right? So, So don't try this at home. But so the same happened here. I just thought it would be great to see if I had this idea, and I had to see if it could work.
Did you think? Have you thought of writing a book in English? Have you ever tried to do that?
No. This is when my daughter was in preschool, I was in charge of the newsletter, and just writing the bi-monthly newsletter in English was so difficult that it made me realize that stick with.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine writing. I mean, I don't know who does that. Nabokov.
Yeah.
Jumbo Lahiri.
Right.
But I don't know. I can't, since my Italian is so bad, I can't tell if it's any good. So yeah, that's a weird thing. That's a very ambitious, odd, grandiose thing to do, I think. So I'm glad you are writing in your native tongue and getting it translated.
What's the next book?
Oh wow! So
No pressure.
it's it's still at a very, very initial stage, so I don't discuss much of it. I can say it will be a novel, and it will take place mostly in Israel, which is a novelty for me because many of my books are set in California and they're about Israeli expats. And the title will be Cover Story, or Sipur Kisui in Hebrew. So.
How did you come to live in California?
Okay, so the long answer or the short answer?
Whichever you prefer.
I'll take the middle road. So, my husband and I were graduate students in England in the 90s. I did my PhD in linguistics in London, and he studied in Cambridge, classics. And the plan was always to do a PhD, maybe a postdoc, and go back to Israel. And in 1996, we were, two poor students. We booked a flight in order to go and vote, and this was when Netanyahu was elected for the first time. And as we said before, I'm a pessimist. So, but even a pessimist like me didn't imagine it would be this bad. But I was pessimist enough to think, okay, things are going to become really bad. And we started to look for jobs elsewhere, and my husband got a job at Stanford, and that's where we are today. So,
Is he Israeli?
yes.
Interesting.
I have a question. You say that you're a pessimist. I wonder if that is a motivation and an incentive for you to continue writing. In other words, if you were an optimist, do you think you would lose the urge and the desire to keep writing and keep putting out art?
That's a great question. I never thought about it before. I guess I am, yeah, because I always think like, who knows how many years I still go. If I were an optimist, I would say, oh yeah, I can, yeah, exactly, relax at the beach. Maybe there's always time to write the next book. But no, I have this urge. So thanks for bringing this up.
Like some of the most beloved and celebrated artists, they were pessimists and they had a lot of internal conflict and stuff that they were
Right.
processing.
No, I'm a very proud pessimist.
Yeah.
Thank you for making me realize that. There is a connection between.
And yet there has to be some kind of optimism there to actually move to another country. If you were really a pessimist, you would have stayed in Israel and suffered and just even if nothing bad had happened, you would have every day, which is how I live my life, every day you say, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And you didn't do that.
Right.
So,
and you have to be optimistic, at least a little bit optimistic to even write books, as we said, because, to believe that somebody will actually read it. Right?
Yeah, and to think that you can get to the end, which is like, yeah, exactly. Do you, when you're done with a book, do you think I'll never have another idea, which happens to me with every book?
So because I was working on my first book when I was still, first a PhD student and then a postdoc, so I had this period when I was doing several things at once, and the idea for the second book came when I was still in the first book. So I always try to have a little bit of reserve. So I always have some ideas. I sometimes think none of them is good. Maybe I won't be able to realize them, but I do have ideas. But I don't know if I can turn them into books. That's the big question.
But you got to start with the ideas, and I find them hard to come by. So I'm impressed.
I'll ask another question. How much of your real life finds your way into your writing, or is it all just made up characters? How much is informed of your own experience?
So how much of my real life gets into the books? It's funny because I think I was asked this question directly for the first time only 2 or 3 years ago, and I guess people just assumed before that none or all and I looked at this person and I said, if I have to be honest, then I would have to admit that a lot more than I'm willing to admit. Sure. Yes. So I'm always using, it's always through a filter. I never write about, people I know or things that, people can recognize themselves, but I do use a lot. I can tell you that I wrote a novella about a a mother and a son who are going on a bar mitzvah trip to Europe, and it was based on a college friend who came to stay for 2 nights with her husband, her sweet 8-year-old, and their annoying teenager, 13-year-old. And this friend read the novella and she loved it, and she had no idea it was about her. So
That's good.
Any more questions? Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
And congratulations. And we have plenty of books for sale, and I'm sure they'll sign them for you. And thank you guys so much for being here. That was
Thank
great.
you. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
Tessa.
us.